Wendy Rosenberg. I'm here today at Total Wine and Plantation, Vice President of South Florida Title Associates, the Nob Hill branch, and I'm here with Clinton Williams and Cheryl Melton, and we're here to help you present the buyer-broker agreement. I'm Wendy Rosenberg, Vice President of South Florida Title Associates, the Nob Hill branch. I've been in the title business for over 30 years. I like to say I started when I was 12. So if you have any questions for title, even if it's not my file, feel free to reach out to me because I'm very happy to help. If I don't know the answer to your questions, I know where to find the answer to your questions. We have multiple branches of South Florida Title. We have bilingual processors and closers. We can close real estate anywhere in the state of Florida. We work with RON closers, notary closers, whatever you need to get your deal done, we get it done. Okay, I have an awesome team at South Florida Title. My branch is the Nob Hill branch. We have an amazing team. We're doing a great job. I know I see a lot of you out here that have closed with us, and you can attest to that. My team is really, really great. I have to say our prices are super competitive. We do not upcharge our lender fees. We're one of the very few title companies that don't upcharge that lender fee. We only charge $25 for simultaneous issue, where a majority of other companies are upcharging that by $100, $200, $300, $400, $500, and you and your buyer would never know the difference. So when you have a loan, you can ask a title company what they charge for simultaneous issue, and you might be very shocked, unless you ask me, and I tell you, you only charge $25. So I know a lot of you attend all my Zoom meetings and classes, and you say, Wendy, you do all these great trainings, why do you do them? So I like educating realtors. I've been doing it for many, many years, even before it was fashionable. But I hope in return that you get great, useful information out of my trainings. And when you have your next contract, you think of me, Wendy Rosenberg, South Florida Title, the Nob Hill branch, for your closing. You put that on your next contract, I would be super thankful. And I always say, I don't need all your business. Of course, I would love all your business. You know, I know you have your own in-house title companies, favorite attorneys. So if you just think of me on your next deal or the one after, I'd be super thankful. And I know that you're going to be really happy with our service. So enough of me, and I'm going to talk about why we're here today. So I've assembled two realtors here to talk about their use of the buyer-broker agreement. I know that's a very, very hot topic these days. So I've selected two realtors who I feel are really in front of the curve to talk about this with you. Clinton Williams, he's with EXP, and I've worked with Clinton since he got in the business, actually.
Yeah, 2011.
Yeah.
She did my first transaction. Yeah.
I've been doing them ever since, and I have to say I am really, really pleased with the way Clinton conducts his business. He's very professional. He's been using the buyer-broker agreement for many, many years, and that's one of the reasons I selected him, his professionalism. She has the buyers to sign her agreement, and it's all about how you present it and what your service that you're giving them, and she really impressed me with the way she handled it. And the presenter also was impressed. And when she did a Zoom meeting last week, she mentioned Cheryl, not by name, but the person in the meeting that really impressed her as well. So I think I have two top experts here to help you navigate through this system. I did prepare some questions and answers. I'm going to ask you guys all some questions. We're going to go back and forth, and then I'll let Clinton and Cheryl elaborate or talk whatever they want to say. How many of you are using the buyer-broker agreement? Okay, so not very many of you. And is that because you've never used it, you're not comfortable with it, or because you're afraid your buyer's going to go to somebody else? Or all of the above?
I've never used it. Just not comfortable with it yet.
Okay, so Clinton, how often do you use the buyer broker agreement?
So I've been in 2011 when I started. So I had a coach. So I don't credit this to myself. I had a coach that basically told me, if you're gonna work with a buyer, you have to treat them like a listing. So starting off, I maybe had an unfair advantage. I didn't know any different. So every single buyer I work with signs a buyer broker's agreement since 2011. When it wasn't considered buyer's broker's agreement, we had our own little thing that we created at that time.
And what about you, Cheryl?
Well, welcome everybody, I'm happy to be here. And I see we had like 3 people who are using the buyer broker agreement, so you're buyer broker agents. So I'm wondering the rest of you, what your definition of your services would be. Are you a chauffeur? Are you a tourist guide? I mean, I don't know. And I think the purpose of being here is for those of you who would like to be able to lift your business to a new level, that we can help you become more comfortable with using the buyer broker agreement. And one of the things that we could address is, what are the advantages to using a buyer broker agreement? Does anybody wanna tell me an advantage to use it?
Hopefully from a
Yes.
loyalty.
What is it?
Just makes the buyer feel more committed.
Yes, I would feel more committed. What else?
We don't waste time driving around or being a tourist guide.
There you go, all of the above, right?
So there are advantages to the agent, the broker, but more or less, I hope today we can see the advantages to the buyer. Like, your buyers are not signing agreements, most of them, but your sellers have a listing agreement. Look at all the advantages that the sellers have. Access to your MLS, your complete loyalty and your skills and everything. The buyers don't have any guarantee of anything, and I think you're gonna see that today.
So how do you, if you are working with a buyer, how do you convince them to sign the agreement? Do you just say, here's my agreement, you need to sign it, or I can't work with you if you don't sign it? What would be your spiel?
So, it doesn't really become a spiel per se,
Okay,
because every buyer I work with, they go on an appointment, right? So it's not, hey, somebody calls me up, hey Clinton, or my team, I wanna see 123 Main Street. Sure, that's great. We will show you 123 Main Street, but we have a couple questions for you. Are you able to meet me at my office? And it's at that point we present the value. Because as you mentioned, right, we see it as a position of, okay, well, it protects us as agents, but in reality of it, it's a mutual beneficial agreement, right? They have some form of attachment to you, which can be broken, let's be honest with you, right? But it does make them feel that that gives you the opportunity to show how competent you are as an agent. And if you're working with somebody that you feel less competent, why would you not sign an agreement with them? And that's how we position it. We have a complete buyer's broker's presentation that we go through with our clients at the time at our office in a controlled environment, not at the house. And once again, it doesn't come as spiel. It just shows you this is how we work. And if I feel comfortable working with you, and you feel comfortable working with me, this is how I proceed.
so you never meet them at the house, you always meet them somewhere else before?
100%.
Okay.
Never once, and I would never recommend it for a couple different reasons.
So I think a lot of how many agents are meeting the buyer for the first time at the house? Okay, so the rest of you are meeting the buyer somewhere else for the first time?
Always at the office.
Always at the office? Okay. So, but you both have the buyer, sign the buyer broker agreement? Right, and I know we spoke, Laura, and you told me your team always has that agreement signed in place. So, and you have that signed in place too. So that's the difference. If you're just meeting the buyer at the house, you don't really have time to review your services.
Yeah, and usually when I speak with new agents, that tell them that, hey, you should meet your clients at the office, their first apprehension is, well, they want to meet at the house, right? I'm gonna lose that potential client. but you don't really know if that person's actually gonna be a client unless you meet them, right? If they're serious about buying a property, guess what? They'll go to a doctor if they're sick. They'll come to you if they feel that if they truly wanna buy a home. So that's my mindset. Do I lose clients? Probably, right? But yet at the same time, I know everybody I work with is a buyer.
And what about you? What if you, Cheryl, what if they don't want to, what if the property is in Boynton Beach and your office is in Hollywood? How would you handle that?
I wouldn't go there.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I think there's a safety issue in today's environment. You know, maybe even more so for females, I don't know.
Would you meet them like maybe at a Starbucks or something, or?
Possibly, if they showed me the cash, show me the money, and maybe.
So you wanna, it's also safety, right?
Yeah.
You wanna verify up front that they are who they say they are, get their IDs, so that's all part of the preparation.
So I'll chime in on that too, cause we work, Broward, Dade, Palm Beach County, and it had times, I know we didn't talk about it, but I have a real estate team, so we work all 3 counties. I just don't run up and down every place. But, but it had times where I worked with a client, and my office is in Weston, and they're buying something in Palm Beach County, and for financial reasons, it makes sense for me to go show something in Palm Beach County, and I don't have an office there. But yet at the same time, you usually schedule 2 things. I would go to a Regis Center, rent a room, right, for an hour or 2, right? Or I would, worst case scenario, I would do a Starbucks or find a quiet coffee shop and talk to them ahead of time. I'm talking about a coffee shop, saying, hey, I'm gonna meet a client, and is it okay if I spend like an hour or 2 here just discussing it? And I just tip the people at the front desk nicely, right? Just to create an environment I could control.
Just for a quick note, Dunkin' Donuts will rent you a conference room as well.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. But what I found is that people are more keen to elaborate at Starbucks, for whatever reason. I know I've done a Dunkin's, for whatever reason, Starbucks just creates another energy that allows our clients to feel more comfortable.
Okay.
So that's just a beta test. Between Regis's, which is everywhere, by the way, and Starbucks, which is everywhere, you have that consultation ahead of time. But yes, I would go to Palm Beach if I'm far away and just have that consultation there. And I've even done it where I've had that consultation and scheduled that showing after that. And I've also done it where I had a consultation and had to cancel the showing after because I found out that was not gonna be a good fit, right? So.
Well, that's good to know. I mean, everybody has their sphere of where they're comfortable showing property, and some people like to stay in their area, and some, you know, the whole state of Florida.
I don't think it has anything to do with the area.
No, I understand.
It has to do with the fit of the customer.
Yes.
With you as the agent.
Correct.
Yeah.
So I know a question that a lot of agents have is, so I'm working with an FHA buyer and they're struggling to come up with a 3% down. How are they going to pay you? Who would like to answer?
Well, the buyer broker agreement is going to have a field where you put in what they're gonna pay you. If you wanna just suggest an example of a number you might put in there, like what?
Maybe 3 apples, right?
Yeah, so if you put 3 apples in there, and they don't have 3 apples at closing or in negotiation, oftentimes you can get it from the seller. You might be able to increase the price. You might be able to get seller concessions. I know you guys have found lots of money that you needed extra money laying around at closing to get them to work. Look to your own pocket last for the apples.
The apples. And I guess, go ahead, Ben.
If it's in the MLS with a stated price for paying the broker's buyer, how are we going to get more out of them? You can't do it unless you get the agreement.
That's true.
If they say no, you're out of luck.
Yeah, and that's just what it is. Have I gotten paid more than it's listed on the MLS? Yes. All my buyer's brokers agreement states 3 apples, as an examples. I probably had 1 or 2 transactions where I did not get paid what is on top of, the agreement. If it's listed for, say, 2.5 apples, that is what we should get paid, right? That's what, between the seller and the listing agent agreed upon paying the buyer's side. Is there ways that you could get paid more? Yes, there is, but you have to make sure you disclose that to your buyer. And that's the purpose of having that buyer's consultation. I think the biggest thing here, past the buyer's broker's agreement, if we just back up and just making sure we have a nailed down buyer's presentation, so they have the value that they understand the value you present, and understand that, okay, well, in this scenario, I work for this much, and if I don't, then we'll either figure it out through negotiation, or worst case scenario, that gap is covered by you. A majority of times, I don't have an issue getting that, my compensation that's dictated under that buyer's broker's agreement.
So in other words, if they're paying the buyer's agent 2.5 apples, you only have to come up with 1/2 apple. Because the 2.5 apples will offset the 3 apples.
It would, and I guess the question Wendy had is, so we've worked with buyers in the past, and it all depends on the demographic, that's the reality of it is. If they don't have, if they're barely coming up with a closing amount, how are you gonna get your commission from them? That's just it.
Yes,
right?
that's the
That's the question.
Good question.
And the reality of it is, I'm here to provide value. I'm not here to stick my hand in somebody's pocket if they don't have the money. If they don't have the money, they don't have it. So, my answer is that I still show them, I still negotiate the way I would. I'm gonna attempt to negotiate to ensure that we get paid as we would like to, but if we can't, then we don't. That's kinda how I go at it.
But basically, it's my understanding that you can negotiate with the seller that maybe they can contribute to the closing costs of the buyer to offset that difference.
Correct. And that's how we typically do it. And I have to say typically because we've been recorded. So I just wanna make sure that I say the right things. But it will be considered, because that additional commission, just like, transaction fee with your
Yes.
buyer, that is considered part of their closing cost, correct? If I had a HUD that where I receive more from the buyer side, you'll see that buyer's commission paid by the buyer is part of the closing cost. And at that point, we'll be negotiating for the seller to pay a certain percentage or a number toward the buyer's closing costs and or prepays. And that's how that difference is compensated. But it has to be in alignment with the buyer. The buyer has to understand what's happening. And the only way the buyer is gonna be willing to do that, because technically when they're paying that closing cost for your commission, they're paying it. So they have to see the value of why they're working with you. And going back to it, that's where you have the buyer's consultation. That's where you bring the value. Not just because you're handsome and you're beautiful, that they're gonna pay you more money. So, that's it.
So what I really liked, Cheryl, when we were speaking last time was how you presented yourself and your services to the buyer. Like, what do you tell them? I was really impressed by what you were saying.
Oh gosh, I don't remember what I said.
So typically if I'm a
Another
buyer,
answer?
Yeah, but just, yeah.
Well, I think the most important thing, and used to be when I was in real estate, the agent would say, I'm $1 million, whatever it was, I think it's not the agent's qualifications. I think when Clinton mentioned that he sits down with the interview, I call it an interview, with the buyer, when you first meet them, I think that's the very most important step, and I bet there's a lot of you out there that skip that. You run straight to the house, open the lockbox, open the door, but if you go to that interview, I always say they have to come to the interview first, and then ask them the questions. Okay, when, why, how, where, financing, cash, exactly what they want and what they're looking for, so that the agent or myself, I want to thoroughly understand their goals, because it's not my goal wanting the commission in my pocket. It's about helping them achieve their goals. So, and there's so much, to me, there's so much psychology in this business. And once you sit down with a person for an hour and let them spend the whole hour talking about themselves and their personal lives and their goals, it's almost like they're glued to you. Forget the paper. They love you because they revealed all these intimate things to you, and they think that you understand by the way you're acting with your body language and saying, I understand, I agree. They're like this with you already. So I think that's a really important step to me that we agents may be tempted to skip because the buyer expresses urgency. And they know they love the house, they want to see, and if you don't go, they're going to go to the listing agent or somebody else, and you can get very pulled in that direction. And I honestly think that's starting off on the wrong foot.
Absolutely. And how many of you don't request proof of funds or
Right.
see that they're pre-qualified? Does everybody request a proof of funds or a pre-qual letter before showing a property?
Yes.
So is there anybody that doesn't? Who would show a property? I know I'm putting you on the spot, so nobody's gonna answer that question, right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to assume that everybody gets a pre-qual letter from the mortgage company or proof of funds before showing a property. So I know nobody's gonna say that they don't do that because you don't want to admit to it, but I'm sure that plenty of you out there don't always do that, but that just really should be the first step, right? So that's part of the interview, getting that information, meeting with them in advance. I have another question that we already discussed a little bit before. So if you have that buyer-broker agreement, does that make you a single agent?
Do you guys know?
So,
It's not, right?
You're still a transaction broker?
You're still a transaction broker.
Right.
You're still a transaction broker.
and I printed something off from Florida Realtors, and then you can elaborate on that.
Yeah, so, signing that buyer's broker's agreement, I stated, it does not make you a single agent. The way you become a single agent is there's an actual document that you sign, a form, that you turn into a single agent. But as you guys know, because we're in Florida, we have to transact as a transaction broker. So I always start off in the beginning as a transaction broker from the jump. I had times where this price point was a little bit higher, and that buyer required me, because he was very knowledgeable, he wanted me to be exclusive to him, so a single agent. I had to express to him, hey, granted, I'll be a single agent to you, but eventually, as I'm about to write that contract, we go on the contract, we have to transition into a transaction broker. So, question answered, no, it doesn't make you a single agent. It just shows them, or just details out the responsibilities that you have to them as an agent.
So, and there was, I copied this off from Florida Realtors website. It said, if a buyer signs a buyer-broker agreement, the realtor is still a transaction agent. The buyer-broker agreement is a contract between the buyer and the real estate broker who supervises the real estate agent or realtor you want to work with. The agreement outlines each party's responsibilities and duties during the home buying process, as well as how long you'll be working together and how the arrangement may be canceled. The agreement does not change the realtor's role as a transaction agent. The transaction agent is a real estate agent who works with both the buyer and the seller in a real estate transaction. The transaction agent owes both parties a duty of honesty and fair dealing, but cannot provide undivided loyalty to either party. So does that sum it up, or is there something?
No, that's the definition of a transaction broker. So, like I said, I always work as a transaction broker, unless required differently. But we always have to close or go on a contract as a transaction broker, because that's just how it's set up. Because we can't communicate essentially to the seller side if we're just a single agent. We have to transition And there's a form that transitions you from a single agent to a transaction broker, which has to be signed also too.
So that's if you, okay. If
Yeah,
you-
that's if you start off as a single,
If you start off as a single agent, then
Correct.
in the end, you have to sign a form to be a transaction.
correct, and usually I have that form signed the same time I have the single agent form signed. So when we do have an offer on the table, now I'm already transitioned into a transaction broker. And that,
So what's the purpose of being a single agent then? Because I mean, if you're going into the transaction, status, that's when it's important to be a single agent.
so what I found is that, with a single agency, you have purely fiduciary responsibility only to the buyer,
Correct.
right? Transaction broker, you kinda split in the middle.
Transaction.
Correct.
Your transaction. It depends on the price point, depends on the client. They have requested me to perform as a single agent.
Correct.
Because of knowledge I have of them, they wanna make sure it is not, passed on to the seller side. As soon as they get under contract, now I have to transition into a transaction broker to finish the deal. So that's the purpose of it,
After
Yeah,
you
but-
sign the contract.
after the contract
The
is signed.
contract is signed.
Yeah, but at that point, you're losing the sole fiduciary to the buyer. And in negotiations, that's what the buyer wants, is for you to have full fiduciary with
So
them.
you could still be a single agent, While negotiating.
Yeah, until you sign, until you
but
sign.
once it goes pending or under contract, then you have to transition out.
Bottom line is, it's a law, whether you like
Yeah.
it or understand it. I mean, we probably have a hard time understanding it, but that's the law right now.
So there's a lot of gray areas, so, this is all new to us, so there's a lot of questions and gray areas, and I see a question in the back, Tish.
No, it's more of a statement with this single agency form. We, as agents, we have inbred in us our fiduciary duties to our clients. However, our clients don't know what we give them. Giving somebody an actual form is an introduction to say, hey, this is my oath to you. We know what we're about, but they don't know what we're about. So until we outline it to them and give them a form, it's just like giving you a card, this is what I do. And with this card or with this agreement, this is what I bring to the table. Now, again, we know what we do. We know that whenever we talk to somebody, we give them this automatically, but they don't know that. So the single agency form is just more of a business card in essence to say, hey, this is what I do. This is my obligation to you, whether you understand it or not. We have to take the lead in essence, moving forward to educate everybody along every aspect of everything we do, because until we spell it out, and until we explain each stage of what we do, when we do it, how it's done, why it's done, they don't know our value. And this is the purpose of these courses, is to exponentially explain our value, what we bring, why we should be paid for our services.
And that's exactly it, and that's what I was so impressed about when we asked why should somebody work with you, and why do I sign your buyer broker agreement when, the realtor across the street is going to show me 20 houses and I don't have to sign anything, I don't have to be obligated to anything, why should I work with you?
Oh, I think that's a great question. And I would think I would start out by saying, do you understand every property that's listed in MLS, and all the properties we're gonna see probably have signed an agreement like this, only that their agent is representing the seller. And then and if you don't have an agreement saying that you're being represented by an agent, you're not protected like the seller's protected. I mean, the agreement, the contract obligates the agent to so much more, and the fiduciary relationship and everything. And you could ask them, would you want to be out here wandering around unrepresented, hoping to get the best deal, or going from agent to agent, or going worse yet to the listing agent who represents the seller? Or would you rather have your own agreement that says that I'm committed to you, and you have priority of all my time and attention, and I'm not gonna be giving it to somebody else who's not willing to sign an agreement? I will be making a commitment to you, and here's the benefits. And I mean, I don't think you need to get too much into that, because once they've, interviewed and they've laid their heart out, I think they're more willing. At that point, you could just say, here's the agreement, sign here. But if you needed more, you could explain how all the sellers out there are represented by an agent under contract, and buyers are. And if you're a buyer out there, you should be too, because there's so many benefits to you, the buyer. And then you can list them. You could have a list printed out and just show them what the benefits are if you wish, to make it easy, fast.
I mean, that's a great point. You know, coming back to what we discussed earlier is that buyer's consultation, right? And I think that's where anybody who doesn't do one, they're missing opportunity, not only for that transaction, but referrals for transactions after that, because majority of agents don't do a detailed buyer's presentation or consultation. So by them just coming into the office, like meeting you at Starbucks or whatever you set up, and you have an outline of how you're gonna present to them, right? And you're presenting the value from the beginning, that off the bat differentiates you. I know it's easy to say, and maybe not the easiest to do at first, but becomes natural after doing it a couple times. And in that presentation, there's the word value for it is a value proposition. And you ask, why pay me? Because I'm expensive as a real estate agent, right? I charge a pretty decent size transaction fee. I work for a specific amount of apples, right? Which I hardly ever, falter on. Why me? Why my team? And it's gonna be different for me than anybody else, but the value proposition I created was based upon the values that I would want as a buyer, right? Specific things that would make somebody stick to you. I'll tell you one of the things I utilize as a value proposition for our team is that we have a love it or list it guarantee as a buyer, meaning that if there's any reason why you don't love this property and when 12 months you decided, you know what, I made a bad decision, right? Because think about all facts of why a buyer would not want to sign with you, why a buyer would not want to buy, right? And you kind of re-engineer that thought process and make a stupid decision not to work with you. So with this, I guarantee one of them is, okay, if you decide I hate this property, I don't like the neighborhood, I would put on the market and sell it on my side of the commission for free, right? Marketing paid by myself, all that good stuff, you will have to pay the buyer side, but I'm selling it for free, right?
That's excellent.
A simple, just if you look at the little things that create value for your client, right? And you present that as your value proposition, there's no reason why that person will leave your table, your environment, and not have it signed. And if they like everything they heard, and the same thing, if I like working with you, because you mentioned the point is not, I would go to Jupiter and sell a property if I have a good connection with that buyer, all right? So that buyer would work with me anywhere if they have a good connection with me. And that connection starts with what? Trust. And a contract, believe it or not, creates some form of trust, right? It's a written document that creates trust. And being able to present that in that way, I think has been beneficial, where in the beginning, full transparency, when I first started doing buyer's consultations, it probably closed maybe around 50%, right? For every 2 people that came in, I probably closed 1. Now we're about like 95, right? I'm a percentage guy, right? So we track everything. In addition to a value proposition, prior to COVID, we have essentially majority of every buyer that went on the contract was on the contract about between 92 and 95% of list price. COVID jacked up that stat for us because everything was selling above the list price. But those are all the things that you cite, you show that this is the reason why it's worth working with me. You may pay more, but in reality you're paying less because I'm gonna negotiate that price down, right? So having that menu of services as a value has been beneficial, allowing your clients to feel comfortable to sign that agreement.
Oh, well said, Dave.
Well, Clinton, I bet you never had to list a house under that agreement, did you?
No, I have not.
That's what we
No, I'm not. And honestly, I wouldn't mind, because as you know, as agents,
Sure.
listens leads to leverage. So even though I may not actually, may not actually have a commission from that, more likely I get another listing from it. So, but yeah, so it's still valuable to them and it's still valuable to us.
So it's all about your value proposition, right? Like how you present yourself and what you have to offer the clients, the buyers.
Right.
So I loved what you had to say about how you speak to the buyers, about why they should work with you. That was an amazing talk. I really liked that a lot.
The less you say about yourself and the more you get them to talk, the better off you are.
So that's a great point.
Mhm.
So you ask them what's important to them and you turn it on them. So another thing I wanted to say also, and maybe part of the value proposition, is that there's a lot of agents out there that really don't know what they're doing, aren't experienced with the contract, and at the end of the day, they end up costing their buyers more money than had they worked with an experienced agent that really knew what they were doing. You know, I've been in the business a long time and I see a lot of contracts out there where agents check the wrong boxes. I've had agents come to me, Wendy, I got a $2 million deal in Boca and I got you the buyer. And I'll be like, you know, title insurance on that $2 million deal is like, I figured maybe $5,000, $10,000. Your buyer didn't have to pay that if you knew which box to check on the contract. So because you're experienced, you're familiar with the contract, you're going to possibly save your buyer money because a realtor that doesn't know any better might be checking off the wrong box on the contract. They might be checking off a wrong box for assessments, who pays for assessments, and your buyer could be paying for assessments that they didn't need to be paying for. So there's a lot of reasons that you want to sign an agreement and work with a professional agent.
I have a question for that.
Yeah, go ahead.
How do you handle the retainer field?
Well, it depends on a lot of things, but I think it all boils down to your self-confidence and your perceived value, so if they feel like it's value. The thing about money is, an attorney would say that's, what's the word you call it? It makes it a commitment when you say $10. It's a legally binding contract when you have, what's that word, compensation or something. So I think that would be important, and you know, you could, do you have anything like, they get that applies towards their 3% or their 3 apples?
Do you
or
charge a
anything?
retainer?
What?
Do you charge a retainer?
No, I don't, but I would. I think it's a really good idea. I think it makes it stronger.
Because I've always charged a retainer.
You have?
Yes.
And what do you do?
What do?
Yes.
I tell them that if they wanna work with me, to get me started and to see that they are serious, I charge X amount to get me started. And if we do close a deal, I use that towards their closing costs.
Exactly.
Where do you put the money?
There's a
With the
field,
title?
there's a retainer fee
Yeah, but where do
in
you,
the contract.
yeah, but where do you deposit the money?
It's pocket.
In your pocket?
Oh.
Are you allowed to?
Or your
No,
broker.
the title company,
Don't you have to give it to
The
your
No.
title company, right?
No,
So you don't have to give
a
it to your
retainer to get started. You're letting them know, that they are going to lose that money. If, that money is basically to get you to start working.
I think that's a good idea.
And if you don't close, or if you don't wind up doing anything, they lose that money.
Right.
That money is to go for your expenses, for your gas, for your printing, for whatever it is that you do to help them out.
Right.
Usually, I just do a small amount in order that's what really tells me they're serious.
Right.
If they don't put up something to show that they're really serious, then I'm not gonna start wasting my gas.
Skin in the game.
That's it.
So does the retainer fee go to the brokerage or does it go directly to you?
No, the retainer fee goes to me.
Okay.
Is that, legal?
Well, yeah, it's legal. I mean, everything is to the broker, okay? But in essence, if you go ahead and you have the full disclosure of what, it's all gonna pan out at the closing, okay? In the meantime, that fee right there is basically going for your expenses. And that's
Yes.
what you're telling them.
So you cash it when you get it immediately, or you just
The
keep it?
broker knows I'm gonna keep that money.
Yeah, but do you cash it immediately, or do you save it until the closing?
It's up to you, you just pay it back and
Is that a little pause and record?
I really would like to understand
Well, I don't know,
how he
because I was the
handles
broker,
that.
so I didn't care.
Oh, so you're the
okay,
broker.
So with the retainer, so I just step in, the retainer is, it could be charged, but it does have to be charged to the broker itself. The broker could, you know, disperse that funds to you. And there's actually a retainer agreement that you would sign stating specific, on top of the buyer's broker's agreement, there's a retainer fee, and then on top of that, it should be a retainer agreement that dictates exactly how the retainer will be utilized and how it will be split, right? Do I charge a retainer? Me personally, no, but I have people in my mastermind group that charge. I've only charged retainers to one group of people, and that's investors.
Oh, okay.
That's it. If you're familiar with investors, they could be very lucrative as a buyer pool, but very time intensive if you're working with, especially new investors. That's the only people I charge a retainer to. But I have friends in the business that charge $2,000-3,000 retainers to clients, and it works for them. It does create a binding contract past just what's on the paper, but it's an actual financial commitment to them. So
But the retainer has to go to the broker
It goes-
because
it
the.
goes to the broker.
Anything,
All money has to go to the
any
broker.
compensation is get rich to the brokerage,
Correct.
you know,
Right.
so.
Okay, but you were the broker.
I was the
He was the broker, so that's what it is,
We're not all
yeah.
brokers in here,
Gotcha,
so
yeah.
we need to be clear about where the retainer goes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
but that's a good point, so you always have a retainer.
But it's like he says, you know, if you're the broker and you have an agent that does get retainers, you can have an agreement between your broker that your broker can just, you know, sign it off to you.
Yeah, your broker
Of
has to
course.
sign that, your broker creates that document, not to get too much in the weeds, but just have to be very careful when you do money directly from them, so you just have to make sure that you have an agreement from
A
your
document,
broker.
a written agreement.
Yep, for your broker that's signed off, that this is how retainers work.
And also another thing to keep in mind is that retainer also becomes part of the full compensation,
Correct.
So it gets credited to the
So
closing costs.
it's disclosed to both parties on the HUD,
Right,
so.
Yeah.
okay, that's a very good point.
Well, on the self-confidence level, which was, my goal is to develop self-confidence in each and every one of you. I think getting the agreement signed would be level 1, and this is level 3, 4, or 5. And then you have the courage to ask for the money. Show me the money. So, I think it would be great. Just forget about your fears and move boldly forward.
So can we maybe do like a little role play? Like say I'm your buyer and I say, gee, I don't really feel comfortable signing that agreement. I've bought many properties in the past and I never had to sign an agreement before. Why do I need to sign an agreement with you?
Look at me. Well, I would say, oh, perhaps I haven't explained it well enough to you. Can I answer any more of your questions? But,
Yeah, I wanna see these 3 houses and I'm gonna buy with you. Why do you need a contract?
Right, why now, why not before? That would be my question to you.
what is your question?
That would be, I've worked with you before,
Yeah.
and I never signed that, and now you are having me sign it, why
Right.
now?
That's an additional level of benefits and protection for you.
Like?
And if you don't see that, you know, do you wanna review it again? The list of the benefits the buyer
Yeah.
broker brings to you?
Yes.
Review.
Okay, so you list.
So just to kind of go into your question specifically, so this buyer bought what you're ready, and now you're presenting a buyer's broker's agreement with them and they have
That's
hesitation.
my point, yeah.
Right? So,
It's the same buyer, it's just before, I never used that. And now he's back in the market, and I haven't gone out with him, but I like him to sign it, so
Mhm.
why now? I asked that Wendy yesterday, and her answer, I guess, is the right one. Well, because things have changed, and even though, you know, it's been there forever, I never had you sign it, because always it was on the seller side to cover our compensation. But since, you know, this change, that's what she said, but I wanted to hear, what would you say to that buyer?
yeah, so this is obviously hypothetical, but like the comment, the first thing I think about is if you work with that person already, you already build trust and loyalty, right? So it shouldn't even be in my mind, it shouldn't be an issue to have them, like this, in my mind, they shouldn't even have an issue signing it, right?
Right. It
And yet,
shouldn't, yeah.
like you said, if they do, you can explain to them, you know, things have changed, right? This is a requirement of our broker for us to engage in the transaction. Now we have to do this. However, you know how I work. You know the value proposition I have. You know I'm gonna take the best care of you possible, and yada yada yada.
So
Your
I could
speed,
present it as a requirement from my broker. That would
Correct.
be good, okay.
and then
Rather than having to explain
reemphasize.
all these changes.
You could, and the thing is, it's important to be okay to, because now it's been, I think I have more questions now from buyers, potential buyers online, social media, regarding the changes. I had a client that contacted me saying, hey, what's happening in the real estate market? I heard that now buyers have to pay commission, right? And that person's not even in the market to buy. It's a past client. So it's everywhere. It's a big lawsuit.
Yeah.
So you have to we can't be afraid to explain it. Just have our talking points and, you know, go from there. Because they're gonna find it. It's on every news channel basically out there,
Yeah.
right? So it has affected, and because of that, we have to ensure that we're protected, and our broker requires us to have this agreement signed and go from there.
Yeah.
You got a question?
Thank you.
The broker.
Oh, go ahead.
How many brokers are requiring that agreement to be signed? Who's I don't think all brokers are requiring that to be signed just yet.
I think most brokers will not require it. It's not in their interest because a lot of people don't know how to use it. They're gonna chase off the customers. So
It's
a
not
lot of brokers
actually
are not
a
even gonna bring it
requirement.
My so I belong to two brokerages, Caldwell Banker in Virgin Islands and EXP. So Caldwell Banker in Virgin Islands, they require it,
Yes.
right?
Coldwell Banker here, I think, requires it also.
Yeah.
And I think yes.
The issue's gonna travel right to the listing agreement itself, and with the sellers, they're gonna get word of this happening, and they're gonna say, I don't wanna pay anything, it's gonna go on the contract, that they're not paying anything to the buyer's broker. So it's gonna start there, cause it's eventually going to get to them.
That's-
So how do
that's
you
what I
list it
think.
on the MLS with no compensation?
They can put zero down if you want.
Zero.
Yeah.
Zero?
They
They
can put zero.
zero on there.
Yeah.
They will put nothing,
Zero.
they put nothing towards the buyer's broker.
How many showings were
It's
there?
legal. for them
I
to
think
do
it's gonna
that.
start to
Yeah.
expand
The
now,
new forms.
now with this
Right.
lawsuit. going on.
Already?
Yeah, already, you can put it in there right now.
So if you see a listing on the MLS that has zero commission, what are you going to do? Your buyer wants to see a property, and on the MLS it says zero commission to the buyer's agent. How do you handle that?
You're either going to lose the client or the customer, or you are going to talk them into paying you a commission that they're comfortable with. Whether it's coming from the closing fees or anything else, they're gonna have to pay it one way or the other.
So are you going to say this property doesn't pay any commission, I need to,
And they wanna see it.
and you wanna see it, what do you say? Do you say I'm not gonna show it?
You have to show it, so.
So what do you
Must
say?
say, you gotta show it.
Yeah,
Right, so how do you handle that?
So, obviously I never showed a property that pays zero.
Not yet, right?
Yeah, right?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet. Keyword.
But I have shown all the time that I pay less than what I typically charge all the time. So I always disclose to them, hey, this is a property, I always show a property. I always show the property. I always bring back up the fact that I'm full disclosure, and I also show them the agent MLS sheet.
So they think.
I don't do the buyer MLS sheet. We have the same sheet that they have. They have the same sheet I have. Guess what? Because on Redfin, on Zillow,
Yeah.
it all
Yeah,
shows
yeah.
the compensation amount. Why try and hide it? It's just there, right?
Okay, so if they, so you're saying you
If
show it to them?
I show to them, I show a property, if, let's just say it says zero, I've never experienced this before. Say, hey John, what do you think about the property? I love it, I want a place to offer. Great, I think it'd be a good fit for you. I just have to disclose, as you know, right now, they're not, the seller's not compensating me as your representative. So we have to figure something out. A couple ways you could do it. If not, are you okay with, the fact that you will be paying me whatever that amount is? And then go from there. And then that's the beginning of the conversation, how we negotiate.
Well, if the buyer broker agreement was already in place, you would have a much better position.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
So if the buyer broker agreement was already in place?
it's always in place.
Okay, so that,
So you already have that position.
Yeah.
so that's still an issue because.
It's still gonna, they still have to come and pay me, right? That's
Right,
the
so
argument.
that, it's still an issue, even though the buyer broker agreement's in place, that they agree to compensate you X apples, but now you see that you're getting no apples from the seller, so you need to have a more thorough discussion with the buyer before you go ahead and show that property, correct?
No, I don't, like I said, I show it, cause that's our responsibility.
Okay, so that is your responsibility to show it.
It's your responsibility to show
The
it.
problem is if you're dealing with a buyer that doesn't have the money.
That's a different scenario.
That's, you know,
That's a different scenario.
how do you extract the money from somewhere?
You can't.
To cover, and
And I think this is something that's gonna happen, I think changes are gonna have to happen. Cause you think about it, this also disenfranchises a lot of people. Because if that buyer, quote unquote, only has enough money to pay closing costs and down payment, and it's not requiring that agent, that they're using to pay them, where they get it from? They can't. Eventually, this is what I heard, and which I feel will be happening, that commission may be considered financeable,
that's the hope.
yeah,
Yeah.
maybe, we'll see, right? That's the only way, cause think about the people that just barely breaking even.
Well, that's the big problem, the people
But
that
if-
don't have the money.
They wanna buy the most they can with their money.
But what my understanding is that you can, speak to the seller and try to get a credit for the closing costs for the buyer, so the buyer's able to pay that commission.
Correct, and that's how we do it, we can't negotiate for a higher commission paid.
Right,
Cause the
but you-
commission is dictated what the commission is, but we could, if we're gonna charge whatever we're gonna charge, we'll go back to the seller side, hey, move forward, the seller to pay whatever X dollars towards closing costs and prepaids. That's now that cost to us is now or that charge from us is now a closing cost to the buyer. That's how we're compensated on that.
I had never done that to where you could charge it as a transaction, you said a transaction fee? Is
So I
that
have
how you charge it?
no, it's considered, look at the HUD, it's considered, buyer's agent commission.
And they
And it's on the
can,
buyer's
they
side.
can literally put that as part of the closing cost to the seller.
No, not the seller, but it technically is part of the seller, usually because
Because
of
the
the HUD.
seller's paying you as for the buyer as a contribution.
No, so that money is, I know it's being recorded, but that money essentially is part of the closing costs. So the seller is paying closing costs and prepaids to the buyer side, right?
Correct.
Right.
And then now that buyer commission that's being charged is part of their closing costs. So that's how it's
That's
shown
how
on
it's
the HUD.
labeled,
So it's
that's
my
how it's labeled on the HUD?
My understanding, cause I had a talk with the broker the other day about it, and I hope that I'm relaying it correctly from what I believe the conversation said, was that the seller will give a contribution towards the buyer's closing costs. And the buyer is able to pay the compensation and get a credit on the closing statement from the seller towards his closing costs.
Okay, now normally, I don't know if things have changed, I haven't been active in a while, but you normally on a conventional deal have a maximum of 3%.
Correct.
On an FHA VA, you have a maximum of 6%.
Yes.
Now, if the seller is already contributing to the buyer in order to help them to buy the house, how are you,
They're gonna contribute extra for the
you can't go
compensation.
beyond the 3 or the 6%?
You can't
Depending
go
on the deal.
Yeah, so that's just what comes back down to, if the buyer doesn't have money,
Right.
so that is an issue, that's something that we have to figure out. But on a regular, our commission's gonna be charged, it's considered a closing cost to the buyer. The seller, we negotiate with the seller to help the buyer pay, all closing costs, pay closing costs and or prepaid, and our compensation is paid from that closing cost, right? That's how we typically do it. But because of this specific question, if the buyer doesn't have the funds and the seller is, in addition to, negotiating, they're giving funds, closing costs to help the buyer buy, they're in a position where it lands where it lands. But we have to show that property. That's our fiduciary responsibility to that buyer to show that property.
Well, and also the buyer is going to have, maybe you change it and have the seller pay the
Reduce it.
title insurance.
Yeah, you have to. That's what it's cutting
You
down.
have fees that are normally paid by the buyer on the, closing that you have the seller pay. Like have the seller pay the title insurance.
That would fall under the 3 or the 6%.
No, it wouldn't, not for, it wouldn't, right?
Yeah, it's part of closing costs. It's
I'm
part of
not
closing
sure.
costs and prepaid.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that one. But on the HUD, it doesn't reflect, if the buyer is paying, if the seller is paying, and correct me if I'm wrong, Wendy, but the seller is paying the title expenses, that's not deducted from, every lender I spoke with, that's not considered part of their, seller contributions.
No.
that
No,
deduct from-
because one of the properties in Palm Beach, automatically the seller's paying for that.
Yeah, it's not part of
So it's
it.
just a matter of who's paying for it. I don't think that counts, because you can obligate either party to pay for the title insurance.
Just like assessments, like if it has a large assessment on the property,
Yeah,
and the
that's,
seller decides to put assessment off, it's not considered a contribution,
yeah.
percentage-wise.
That part of it is not, yeah.
Right, so by
But
shifting
I
some
thought
of
title
the,
policy was,
well, no, because it's whatever's customary in the area. I mean, like I said, in Palm Beach, it's customary for the seller to pay. It's whatever box you check on the contract, it's, you,
And this brings into the fact of value proposition, right? If you can explain this to your buyer, or the average person, or average agent, probably doesn't know as much as you guys know, even just from being here, right? And this is an added value that you could have and explain to them in different ways, like, why am I gonna pay you? Well, this is why, right? And end of the day, the reality, I remember when I first started selling real estate, I had a coach that told, one of the scripts is, when you work with a buyer, is that, you're not paying me, the seller's paying me, right? But the reality of it is, the buyer is paying us. You think about it, the buyer is actually paying the listing agent, right? So it's all about how you change, how you think.
mindset.
And be able to, show the value, because now knowing that this buyer is actually paying you, and if you're in a buyer position, why would you pay this person? You have to present enough value to be compensated. And unless we have that mindset where we present enough value to be compensated, whatever that number is, it's not worth it for the buyer. And I think that's where, once again, the buyer's consultation comes in. And crafting that buyer's presentation, consultation, interview, whatever you call it, is the most important thing. And if every agent did that, and if every agent, in my opinion, had a buyer's agreement signed, and every buyer understood, because part of the lawsuit is that supposedly the clients did not understand how the compensation was, right? And if they're signing a document that shows how the compensation is to be divvied up, right, on buyer side, that it had grounds where, in my opinion, I'm not an attorney, but it had grounds where we probably wouldn't be in this position.
Yeah, and, so, different different states in the country, handle it differently. There are states already out there, I believe California and New York, where the buyer's been paying commission all along. It hasn't been like it is here. So, yes,
That has to do mostly with rentals in New York,
okay, so,
not on regular contracts
but I believe in California, it's on regular contracts.
in California.
I was on a Zoom meeting a couple weeks ago with Women's Council of Realtors, and they had a panel similar to what we're assembling here, and they had realtors from different states in the country talk about signing the buyer-broker agreement. And some states, it's just been perfectly natural, and that's the course of doing business. So everything is customary. Whatever becomes the custom and is in your mindset is what is going to be. Just like, it's customary for the seller to pay for title insurance in Palm Beach County. It's customary. Here in Broward and Dade, it's customary for the buyer. But that's what we're used to, so that's what we accept. So everything is accepted according to custom, just like what they were saying on Pillar Post was saying before about rate on gas. Here in Florida, have any of you ever had a buyer do a rate on gas?
One, and they did it.
Okay,
We
has
had one and
anybody,
they did it.
has anybody else ever had a buyer do a rate on gas test? Okay, so according to Pillar to Post, rate on gas is a big issue here, and it could in the next few years come to reveal that a lot of people are getting cancer from radon that nobody's testing for and nobody's aware of and nobody even, thinks twice about. But I don't know, you weren't all here in the beginning, but every loan, whenever I sign a loan package, every lender has a form in there that your buyer has to sign off on and says, I could have tested for radon gas, but I opted not to. Why do you think they're doing that? To protect them. Yes. So, right now it's not customary, because if you do radon remediation here, it could cost $10,000, and what's gonna happen to your deal? When your buyer says, hey, seller, I need you to pay $10,000 to remediate this radon, they're gonna go, forget that, and we've never done that before. But that's not to say in the next couple of years that that's another step that will be required. So everything is about what we're accustomed to and used to dealing with. So, everything is changing. We're going to see listings with 0% commission. How many of you that are listing would think about even right now putting a 0%? Would anybody here think about putting 0%?
No, but the client will. It's going to spread.
Yeah, but then you have to tell the client that
Nobody's gonna
Nobody's
show
Who's
it.
gonna
gonna
show
show it?
Yeah.
Well, you have
On
to
the
make
buyer's
it clear
side.
why
I
the
know.
sellers should pay the buyer's commission or a portion of the buyer's commission.
So what would you say? Okay, so let's open this up for discussion. Go ahead, Tish.
I think a big thing for listing agents to get in touch with an accountant or several accountants, or make sure that the seller realizes the benefit or the pass-through of the write-off for any sales. All of the commissions that we get, any fees that goes along with the sale are tax deductible, generally. We just need to find out what instances with our seller, is there a unique situation where they will not be able to write off these commissions? Because it's there. It's there for them to be able to do, so it's behooves us to make sure that they're more educated with their accountant, with their financial positions of what they're allowed to write off with, because basically that's a write-off. It's free service for a write-off. Why not try to empower and educate the sellers as to what they can get away with tax? I mean, that's what loopholes are there for. We need to become more educated in understanding and how to educate the sellers to say, what are the benefits of hiring you? It really doesn't cost you anything because you can write off. We just need to find out, or help them to find out, in what instances are you not able to write this off? Or are you limited in what you can write off?
comfortable to say that and give them tax advice?
No, you're not giving tax advice, you're not giving them direct tax advice, you're telling them, you're gonna tell them, you need to have a conversation with your accountant.
Perfect.
Because that's where it goes, and we need to be more educated on how to frame that, so we're not giving tax advice, but just suggesting it heavily.
Be mindful.
Because a lot of them don't realize what the benefits are, they don't realize that they can write, that's a write-off, yes, it's a write-off, and again, it goes back to that service agreement that we were talking about. We know it, it comes automatically, but they don't know it. So it's point of formalizing our knowledge to give them so that they can see it in its entirety as well.
And I think maybe a lot of this also will go back to educating the listing agent.
Exactly.
Before-
I think that putting a delay on telling your prospective listing, to talk to their accountant ain't gonna help you get the listing at that moment. And between the time that they talk to the accountant and that happens, a million things can happen. So that's not gonna help you get a listing.
So would you be comfortable just saying, okay, no problem, you just pay me and we'll put 0 for the buyer?
With this new lawsuit that's in play right now, I think it's just a matter of whether you're talking to the buyer or the seller, it's a matter of just getting them to see that the funds are gonna transfer one way or the other. Because if, right now, the buyer doesn't pay the professional fees and the seller pays it, but it's really being paid by the buyer through the funding. And once that stops happening, then the seller's gonna start making less money because the buyer's gotta pay the money. So it's gonna be a negotiate, hey, you no longer have to pay the professional fees, I do, so I'm not paying you that amount.
So they're gonna,
It's
like,
a transfer of funds, that's
So-
all it is.
basically what you're saying is when you show for sale by owner and your buyer is looking at it, not you show it, basically when you're a buyer, say I'm a buyer, I'm looking at it for sale by owner, and they're asking 500,000, and I'm gonna go, well, gee, there's no realtor on here, so I wanna pay you X% less, because you don't have to pay a commission. So you
Well,
think that's the way it's
That's
going down?
where a buyer's broker comes in really good, because with a buyer's broker contract, at least the ones that I've done, I always let them know, I'll show you for sale by owners, I'll show you anything that's in the multiple listing, I'll show you anything that you wanna see. Now, you have to understand, in some cases, the sellers have already agreed to pay my fees, in other cases, they haven't. So that's where you discuss and you tell your buyers that depending on the fees that you're able to acquire from the other side, it's gonna help alleviate what they have to pay you on their end. But eventually, the fees have to be paid, because you're not working for free.
Okay, so how do you go back and get that paid, like you said, if it's an FHA 3%?
Well, basically what I have done in the past is I tell them, if I'm able to sell you a property that is listed in the MLS, which the sellers have already agreed to pay my fees, then
What if the
then you
seller's
don't
not
have to
agreed to
worry
pay your
about
fees?
paying my
Then
fees.
the seller's not agreed to pay any fees,
That hasn't happened
but it's gonna happen.
in the near future coming up, and that's why I'm saying now the game is gonna start to change, but until then, the only thing that you really have to do is you just have to educate the buyer and the seller, depending on what side you're on, that hey, if you're representing the seller, you're gonna wind up taking less if you want somebody to buy your house, because now they gotta pay the professional fees. If you're working with the buyer, you're gonna tell the buyer, hey, you're gonna have to come up with this money until the banks start to fund or allow it to be included in your funding, which they're considering, and they're gonna have to.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to, the banks are gonna have to allow it, because, you know, if not, they're just gonna stop the whole chain of buying and selling.
So we have another, go ahead, Tish.
Okay, so going back to what you just said about they have to allow, they already do. Because traditionally it's shown that, or mortgage that shown, when it's listed, they appraise it for higher. The lenders allow a higher appraisal to account for that. It's studies, they've done it right now. When they sell it for sale by owner, no realtors are involved, it appraises low, everything's low. When you sell it through a realtor, it's valued higher. So it's already there, it's just shifting the legal framework to allow it, as you said, the lenders are looking into it. Either way it goes, it's a cost. It's just framing it in a different way.
No, it's
Even
a lot,
though you
it's
say
legally allowing it to go on the HUD, that's what it is.
Exactly, it's just legal framework, but even though you say that the buyers are paying for it, no, the sellers are also paying for it as well, because when they give that money away, they're not getting it. For the ones who don't know how to do it right, they're not seeing it in their property, so yeah, they still are paying an amount, even though you say, yeah, the buyer's paying through funding, it's still the seller's giving it away because the seller's getting less.
They're not giving it away because they're getting a higher price for their property.
Correct, but they still see it, and their intent is them giving some of their money away, they don't realize that with the realtor, they get a higher appraisal. They
Yeah,
don't
but if I
realize
understand
that.
the question, once this starts to shift,
Correct.
okay, how is that gonna affect buyer and seller? And what I'm saying is, the only thing you gotta do is educate whichever side you're on.
Absolutely.
Whether you're on buyer or seller, because those funds have to come from someone.
Absolutely.
And nobody's
It's
gonna
just-
work for free.
It's just a framework, right, exactly, it's educating both sides, as
Yeah.
you said.
So do you have anything to chime in on that?
No, I think.
Pretty-
But I have a question.
Yeah, go for it.
What do you usually tell your prospective buyers when they tell you, this is like the most common question that I've gotten in the past, why do I need to pay you? Or why do I have to sign this contract with you when nobody else is making me pay or do this contract?
You wanna go first, or you wanna go?
Go ahead.
Okay, so, that's a good question. I don't get asked that question. I know it sounds kind of, I just don't, because.
It would be very convincing.
Yeah.
You've already
No,
I read
you
it.
must be just working with referrals by this point.
No,
No,
majority
these
majority
two
of my
people
business.
have it
Yeah.
all nailed down.
Yeah. So just, I don't work referrals, probably like 25% of business is referrals. Majority of my business is listings, right? I would say that. The buyers that I work with, maybe because of the confidence I come across with, if you're in front of me and you don't see the value that I present to you, that's okay, right?
Exactly.
But there's usually no back and forth. Why am I gonna sign with you? Cause you know why you're signing with me, or why we're gonna decide to work together because of what we discussed. I already went through the whole aspect of, I let them know, this is how I work,
Right.
right? As you mentioned, the whole goal is to get connection with them in the beginning. Explain to them how I protect them, how I get the most money, get the best deal for them as possible. All the value propositions that I have. How does that sound to you? Sounds amazing. So the next step for us to move forward, to work together, is for us to sign this agreement. And that's it. I know it sounds, maybe you might not believe it, but I never had that question. So I can't
No,
honestly tell you.
it's easier when you're not charging a retainer fee, but when you charge a retainer fee and they gotta come up with money, that's when
I will believe
the
that.
whole game
Do
changes.
they
Yeah.
try to negotiate your fee
No,
in the retainer? No?
no, I don't charge a retainer. Investors,
Oh, no,
I charge a
he's the one
retainer.
with the
Yeah.
retainer.
Investors, I have charged a retainer before. Like I told you, that's the only type of clients that I do. And that's because they require a lot more upfront, as you guys know.
So, just to understand, so you said, okay, this is my compensation, it's either paid by you or by the seller, is that it? Or if I charge 3 apples, and if the seller is only charging 2.5, you are gonna pay the difference?
Yeah, we don't say exactly like that, but we
No,
say,
but
yeah.
yeah?
Yeah, we disclose, so it's important that we disclose everything, right? So my compensation is 3 apples,
Okay.
right? As I go through the agreement with them, it's not just like, hey, here's this paper, press here, sign, press hard, sign here, right? It's, hey, this is the agreement that we have, right? And I turn it around and we go through it, line item by line item, and I explain it. I have it pretty much memorized. And the typical questions they have is regarding the retainer, which I don't charge. And anytime I put a 0, by the way, I always write that 0 in, scratch that
So
in front of their
then-
face, right? Typical
Make it
sales technique.
special.
Yeah, right? So, my compensation for everything I gave you is 3%, 3 apples, plus, my transaction fee. alright?
Mm.
I get more questions on the transaction fee than I get on the
Read.
the percentage.
And your transaction fee is large, like a
And what's large?
percentage of an apple?
Whatever
or-
amount your broker tells you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
versus
I
money.
dictate whatever that
Mhm.
transaction fee is. But it's larger than I think a lot of agents charge, alright?
We can't say what atypical anything is because there is no typical.
Yeah,
Okay, so then you explain that the commission is gonna be either paid by the seller or by them?
yeah, so at that point, we talk about, okay, so this is how much we charge. And I've had a question asked, how is that paid, right? I had that question asked. And then that's when I go into say, it depends. It depends on the deal, it depends on the contract, it depends on the property. This is what we get compensated, and through negotiations, that fee is taken care of, right? I don't wanna get too much into details, but one-on-one I can talk to you. Okay, if that makes any sense. I'll be happy to talk to anybody about this, one-on-one.
I wanted to answer your question too, because I noticed something when Clinton first answered this question, and it brought to mind, I have a son who can make 7 figures a year in real estate. They both would have the same answer. They don't answer that question, it never comes up.
Yeah, but
I'm serious, I mean, it might not sound realistic, but if you've done your job with your conference or your interview, and you've established that trust, and they can see that you're successful and competent, you know, they're gonna want you to work for them. And if you've gone over the benefits to them for having the buyer-broker agreement and the cost and everything, then they're just gonna sign it. Most of the time, you don't, like you said, most of the time that question doesn't come up.
Hey,
So you do your job.
Yeah, no, that question usually only comes up once you charge a retainer.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
you're a specialist in that,
It's
so.
like, why do I gotta pay you? Nobody else charges it.
How do you answer that?
You answer that.
Cause I'm a special.
No, seriously, how do you answer that?
I answer that the way I told you earlier. This shows me that you're really serious. And regardless, you're gonna get this money back, cause I'm gonna give you credit for it if we close a deal. If we do not, this basically goes to offset my cost. It takes money, it takes gas, it takes time, it takes printing, I got all kinds of, expenses that I utilize in order to help you to get done what you gotta get done.
That's part of your job, you should pay that. All realtors
So-
have gas expenses.
For me, if I don't get a retainer, I feel like I don't have a client.
Right.
If I don't have an agreement signed, I don't have a client. Actually, on top of my email signature
Yeah, but like you
states,
said earlier, those contracts are easily broken.
they can, but I was starting to say, on top of my email signature, it states that, essentially, if I don't respond to you, I'm actually working with clients that I have a signed agreement with or something like that, right?
Ooh, I
So
love
even
it.
down to my email, it has it on top of it. That's how adamant about with my contracts.
See, the thing that I have found throughout the years, when I was a lot more active, is that until people have money in the game, they can walk away, and it's easy for them to walk away.
Okay.
And the thing is that legally, it's not worth the attorney's fees and the time and the headache and everything else to go after somebody for
A few
to make them, comply with the contract. And in reality, you don't wanna have that reputation either, that, anybody who does business with you, you're gonna be forced to do business. No, you wanna be able to walk out and say, hey, if you're not satisfied with my work, if you're not satisfied with my service, you're welcome to,
But I think you wanna say that anyway, right?
Yeah, exactly,
You don't
exactly.
wanna have a gun to their head.
Right.
You basically, we'll get you in a second, okay? You basically wanna say, if you're in, right, tell me if I'm wrong. If you're not happy with my service, you
Yeah,
can leave me
you-
anytime.
exactly.
It's in the agreement, ours.
Yes.
And that's why that retainer to me is important, because that shows me that they really trust you, that they really like what you have gone over in that consultation. Because I don't do anything until I have a consultation, just like they were saying. That's the primary step. If they come into your office, that's the first step to show that they're serious. If they don't come to your office, then, you know, they're fly by night, I don't care, I won't see them anyway. But that's the first step.
But I guess a big selling point, tell me if I'm wrong, is to say, if you're not happy with my services at any time, you can cancel our agreement.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, totally.
But you, no, because they have to pay the
Retainer.
retainer fee.
Well, for me, the retainer is that you gotta take advantage of that starting point. Because at that starting point, that's what's gonna get you to start actually putting in work. You know, before they even come into my office, I let them know, this is gonna be your opportunity to ask any questions that you wanna ask, and to pick my brain for any concerns that you might have, because after our consultation, you're gonna have a decision to make, and once you walk out that office, you cannot call me to ask me anything.
Right? If you don't sign the retainer.
If you don't sign my contract, if I don't have a retainer from you, you do not call me, you do not ask me anything pertaining to real estate.
Too much talk.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
You're
basically,
creating
if not, no, the
Creating
thing
that.
is that if you have, people will try to extract from you information all the time.
Right.
So that's their one time that you're telling them, ask me anything you want, I'm putting together this meeting for you, and by the end of this meeting, you're either gonna hire me or you're not.
And what percentage do you have of people that don't pay the retainer?
I didn't have anybody that didn't pay.
So 100% of your clients sign the retainer?
Yeah, but they were mostly referrals by that time. By the time that I started using the buyer broker contract, I was doing a lot of.
So you don't have any brand new buyers that came in right now, so they're all referrals, to sign the retainer?
No, not really, because I haven't been active at all in quite some time, so.
Okay, but I mean, that's kind of like a little bit of a different scenario. That if somebody buyer off the internet came in and you met with you and you had that consult.
Well, I've had where people from out of state,
Yeah.
they, wanted to do business because they heard of me or whatever. I do the consultation with them over the phone, and I send them the forms and I send them everything over the phone. I mean, via internet. And if they don't sign that buyer broker contract, and if they're not in agreement with, the retainer, you know, if it's somebody that just calls me out of somewhere, then I'll have the retainer. Sometimes what I'll do is, when they're referrals from people that I've done business with in the past, I'll waive it.
Okay,
And this way they feel special.
So I have to just bring that up really quick, because how you treat one person, how you treat everybody, right?
Well,
So it becomes a little bit, anytime, if that's the purpose of having like a standard practice, why I always have every single buyer sign a buyer's broker agreement, because I can't work with one and not the next.
That is standard practice for me. If you're referred to me from a past client,
Okay,
that's standard practice that, okay, you get a break because you're coming to me from somebody that's already done business with me.
yeah. I mean, everybody does business differently, and
It
you have to
just
work-
makes it more comfortable, makes them feel more special, but if I'm gonna work with somebody that's just coming off the street, I don't wanna waste my time.
yeah, yeah.
And then we gotta wrap up from that too, but in addition to buyer's consultation, why it adds so much value is that a good portion of our pipeline for our buyer's agent is built through that buyer's consultation process, right? Cause like you said, I believe in educating the buyer, right? We have numerous conversations with buyers before they close. However, they'll sign an agreement and not ready to buy right now, cause I'm not, when I have that call, when we get that call from Zillow, Redfin, or whatever it is, I'm not asking if they're qualified on that call. I'm not asking if they're pre-approved, I'm not asking anything about their financial information, not over the phone, cause I don't know them. I mean, that's like somebody calling me, asking me how much money I make, right? Without even having, I just don't. But what I do is, I do get them into an appointment with me, and at that point, we have that discussion.
Get them into the office.
And we have buyer brokers agreements that's more than a year. It depends upon when they're ready, because people call about buying real estate and they're really not ready.
So their time frame on your buyer broker agreement could be more than a year, you don't have a specific time frame.
It all depends. on when the buyer wants to take action.
So I just wanna make a little quick announcement, I know you see wine glasses coming out here. I know we all, after this conversation, we all need some wine.
A Scotch, please.
So, Total Wine, one of the advantages of here is they're giving us a free wine tasting. So hopefully you'll all stick around and we'll have a little free wine tasting. Like I said, after this, we all need it. So we still have lunch back there and we'll have some wine. We're not finished yet, we still have a little bit more to keep going. I saw Meredith had a question.
I was gonna ask the time frame that you put on the buyer broker agreement, just for, and you've kind of covered that already, Clinton, because we know that there are a lot of internet leads that we get a lot of them. They're just starting to feel their way, and so even though we may present that and have that value conversation, what do you put on? You have to put something, you can't leave it blank.
Yeah,
So
you
what do you recommend to put, 6 months, a year? I mean, but
So-
listing agreements, are different, but it sort of works the same way.
Same way, so during that consultation / interview, you get a feel of how far along the process they are.
Okay,
Right?
so,
So I've had first time buyers that really took 2 years to convert through online leads. But yet at the same time, that initial conversation allowed them to stick. As you guys know, internet leads don't stick.
right,
That's the reason why I don't mind meeting with 100 buyers, potentially buyers, and only 20 of them are buyers right now, but all 100 of them are signed. And we stay in constant communication with them throughout the entire process
okay.
through different marketing tools.
But these are all
And then
paid
through buy-
buyers that you've personally met, not just internet leads that you haven't really met, right?
No, we're meeting them. So if somebody calls us from Redfin, we call them, we set up, they come to the office, present the value proposition, how we work, whatever, yes, I wanna work with you. We analyze exactly how far along in the process they are, and we determine how long that agreement's gonna be good for. And we also state in the agreement that, we're not forcing you to work with us, right, no gun to the head. For any reason you feel like we're not doing the job that we're supposed to be doing, you're not getting value
Right.
from us, guess what, I don't wanna work with somebody who doesn't wanna work with me. It's not good for Google, right?
I think
So-
that's key, right?
That's the worst.
Totally.
Somebody who doesn't want life to
Exactly.
repeat more.
So you tell them they're not obligated, right?
Give some good advice.
So that's the whole key also, to make them feel comfortable, to let them know, if you're unhappy, right, you say that, if you're unhappy with my services at any time, feel free to cancel our agreement.
It's written into the buyer broker agreement, in some of the agreements that they have the right to cancel, it needs to be in there, I think.
So do you elaborate that to them also when you're talking to them?
Or you can go over it, mention it, when you're going over agency.
I used to go ahead and I used to have something in my contract that allowed me to rectify whatever it is that they felt they were not satisfied with.
Okay, so you ask them to let you know what they're not satisfied with.
Yeah. And
So you
and
can
if I can't
cancel, but I
if
wanna
I can't
know.
satisfy them, then it would be mutually in both our benefits not to continue to work together.
But you would like them to specify what they're
Yeah.
not satisfied with.
Exactly.
Do you ask them to specify, or you just say, you can cancel?
I mean, coming back to the marketing side of my brain, why wouldn't somebody not wanna sign? Right? So I try and take away all the hurdles as much as possible, cause I know what my value presents. I know what I can do for a potential client. I have, love it listed, I have, easy exits. I mean, if you wanna cancel, John, cancel. Cause I know for a fact I'm gonna provide the value that is required to make sure you're satisfied. And for a reason you can't, then please don't work with me. I don't wanna work with you, just like you wouldn't wanna work with me. I don't say it's not good for Google, and then that's it. I try my best not to bind anybody in any contracts, which we technically do, but we really don't. Even with a buyer's agreement, it's binding, but it can get out. And as you mentioned, it doesn't make sense, in my personal opinion, depending on the price point, going after and trying to find who is the procuring cause for that purchase and going through that process. And thankfully, I never had to do it.
I I know I've seen several procuring clause cases, and it wasn't necessarily because it was a mistake by somebody. I remember one in particular that went on for like a few years, but it was, the buyer really meant to continue working with the buyer's agent that he hired, but somehow the listing agent showed the property and it got into a slippery slope and a legal battle for over a year. The buyer's agent did win, and the buyer sided with the buyer's agent, but the whole commission and everything was tied up for over a year, and a lot of the money, sorry to say, went to legal fees. So, you know, nobody wins except the lawyers, and all the money goes to legal fees. You had another question?
Yeah, do either of you, Cheryl or Clinton, use the FAR bar document, or do you have your own buyer broker agreement that you developed?
I think the bar would be preferable because, you know, it's been approved, and if there were ever anything that went, you know, to ethics or procurement cause,
So you use the one that's in.
I think it's safer.
That's listed.
I think it's safer, or whatever your broker.
Do you also?
I think the broker is really the one that would have the final.
What do you do, Clinton? Do you-
So, when I first started doing it, I had a VIP program.
Okay,
So essentially, it's everything that was inside of the, what you see, FAR bar, but curated to my brand, in addition to the values that I present to them. Now, I still have the VIP program, but I also have that document set along with it,
thank you.
so.
But I think we're gonna see more, forms, buyer broker agreement forms coming out from, Florida Realtors in the next few months, because they're gonna be stating different information. I actually, I don't know if I printed it out, but yesterday, the Fort Lauderdale Board of Realtors had, a little statement about the showing agreements. And they had a little form for commission. I don't know if I don't believe I printed that. But it came from, Florida, not Florida Realtors, the Florida Realtor Board. No, Realtors of the Greater Palm Beaches.
Oh, nice.
This came from them also, that's in your handout. And they also had a little, agreement for showing that was part of what is on their handouts that they sent to all the agents. So there's going to be a lot of, oh, here it is, a compensation disclosure. I don't know if I printed this out.
No.
Okay, but they were emailing this yesterday, Realtors Beaches MLS, a commission disclosure, and it was basically saying, this is for, listings and buyers, listing agents and buyers agents, saying, and I'll read it to you if you want, if you're not with, Beaches, and you didn't get this email yesterday, I'm sure Miami's gonna be sending it out as well, or their version of it any day. But it basically says, by signing below, I, seller buyer, affirm that I've discussed and fully understand the information with blank, real estate licensee. Broker commission is not set by law and is fully negotiable. So those are the keys, it's not set by law and it's fully negotiable. The seller buyer decides what fee they are willing to pay for their brokerage services. The seller buyer has the choice of who they want to pay and how much they want to pay them. And then the second point was, sellers are not required to make an offer of compensation to a buyer's broker, but a seller may if they choose to do so. The seller decides how much that listing broker should offer a broker who brings a buyer to close the transaction. And point number 3 was, the buyer's broker may receive compensation via an offer made from the seller or seller's broker. So this is a commission disclosure that was emailed yesterday from the Beaches MLS. So if you're on beaches, you should have gotten this yesterday, along with these commission do's and don'ts. Like I said, if you don't, I'll be happy to email that to everybody. I'm sure Miami is going to have their version of these forms coming out soon. And I would imagine that there will be updated buyer broker agreements coming out, from Florida Realtors in the very, very near future. Because if you're not working with a coach, or you haven't perfected your agreement over the years, you might want something that suits your needs better, but you realize that this is all gray and it's a slippery slope out there, and nobody wants to say or do the wrong thing or present the wrong form. So, we all have to dot our I's and cross our T's and be very careful with what we say and how we present ourselves. So.
Do we have to disclose that to the sellers now, when we have a listing presentation?
Do you have to disclose that they don't have to pay commission? So, basically,
Is that gonna be part of the listing agreement?
I haven't heard of such a thing.
okay, so I haven't heard of such a thing either.
So,
No, it would.
if they don't ask, we don't tell them?
No, you have to, so, from my understanding, you have to disclose how compensation is, and that's the reason why part of the reason why we're in lawsuit. You have to disclose how your buyer side is being compensated, if you're gonna compensate them. Alright?
Yeah, but what I'm thinking is, if it's something that we have to present to either buyer or seller, it's gonna be in the disclosure forms.
That is a disclosure, right?
It says, broker commission is not set by law and is fully negotiable. This is what you can say to your,
But when is that
Yourself.
paper, is that gonna be
But
part
is
of
it
the
is it
document?
categorized as a disclosure?
this is just on the form from
So
beaches.
that's
It
just
just
an
says-
additional form.
Yeah,
So
it
are
doesn't
they
say,
gonna be
it
required?
doesn't say it's part of the listing agreement. So, until they change the listing agreement, you still have the listing agreement as it exists.
Right.
So,
But-
it's not here in Florida yet, but the Virgin Islands, US Virgin Islands, they follow, Florida very well, also part of NAR. And on their listing agreements, which is very much similar to Florida, it has it, so that verbiage is actually on the listing agreement. And so eventually, I'm assuming it'll get there. And then the state that you were talking about is Wyoming itself. Wyoming, those agents, they don't, like, the compensation of the buyer side is paid by the buyer typically. And that's already in their agreement. So the only reason I know, because I have a friend also who works that market that disclose that. For those states, this is another day.
Old news.
Yeah.
So it's all what you're used to. So, I guess part of it is, there's a lot of realtors in our market here, and maybe this is going to scare off a lot of realtors, so the pool of realtors might get smaller. Same thing that happened back in the bubble. A lot of realtors dropped out because the market shifted and there was a lot of short sales, and it was a different market than we were used to, and a lot of realtors pare away. So this is going to also maybe pare away a lot of realtors, and it's going to be, once again, only the strong survive. So maybe for those of you that are here and the strong realtors that want to be up to date and know how to present everything and want to learn and suck up everything and know how to present yourself with confidence, you're the ones that are going to be here when this falls out. And the ones that are just in it for part-time because, I might get a deal here or there, they'll be gone. So there'll be more for the more professional realtors here. Did you have something you wanted to say? Yes.
The new agreement is out. Line 8A shows what the total commission's going to be. Line 9, notice to seller. Line 133 is transition from single to transaction broker.
You mean on the buyer broker agreement form?
No, on the
On a
The
contract?
listing agreement.
Oh, the listing
The
agreement.
listing agreement.
Okay,
Already.
It's out there.
okay, well, that's good to know. Thank you for sharing that. So I guess nobody's really seen the new listing agreement yet. Denise, did you have something?
Yeah, if I have the agreement signed from my client and the client buys with another agent, what's happened?
They owe you.
I have,
It's a battle.
What was the question?
So,
If she has a buyer broker agreement signed and the buyer buys with another agent, what's your recourse?
yeah, what should I do? A wire?
Well, that's really the only recourse.
Can you bring up-
That's why I was saying,
you bring up to your broker and your broker
It's violated an agreement, a written agreement.
I mean, unless you show something, that was under
And if
contract.
they come and explain to you the reason why they did it.
and the only reason I just didn't even follow up with it, didn't do anything, cause I hadn't shown the lady anything physically.
So if you show all the properties and that happens, then you have a procuring cost?
Same thing.
I don't wanna answer that question, so I don't really know.
Okay, so we don't really know. So that's a great question, and
What was the question again?
you probably would need to speak to your broker about that.
All I did was I fed listings to the prospect buyer, and she wound up going with somebody else. So I was gonna, I told the broker at the time, because I signed with a broker, that was my broker for a long time. And he said it's not worth even going after it. He says, you're gonna win, but it's
Well,
not
that's
worth
your
it."
case, but if you show the buyer 20 houses and you spend 3 weeks showing them, and then they
Then I'm
walked
sure
into an open house and bought it from the listing agent, you might feel like you wanna hold them to your agreement.
For sure. And the
So
broker probably
that's-
will. The broker probably will go after them.
Yeah, so that would be a broker question, if that situation arises, you would need to speak to your broker about how you move forward with that.
Oh, yeah.
So that was an excellent question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, and I think there've been a lot of excellent questions, and I think our panelists have been amazing. And I wanna thank you, Clinton, and Cheryl. And I really, you lived up to all my expectations about your expertise. And a lot of you out there, I see you are very knowledgeable as well. And I appreciate your feedback, because it's really helpful to have some give and take and some different experiences. So after we've gone through all this, so glad that we can have some wine. We need it, right? This market here is,
Sort of guide our way out.
yeah, we still have sandwiches in the back, and we have a video, so, I'm going to, am I gonna be able to send the video, or?
Yeah, it'll be on YouTube.
So we're gonna put it on YouTube, and I'll send you all the links. We are going to do another class at Total Line in Pembroke Pines on Valentine's Day. So February 14th, that will be from 2 to 4. That room actually holds a lot more people. I kind of cut my registration off here because I was afraid that the room would be too full. So I capped it. I know that other room I don't have to cap so much. So even though I allow for no-shows, I still was very cautious about overbooking the event. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out. We'll be here for a little while. And I hope you've got great useful information. And when you need a title company, you think of me, South Florida Title Associates, Nob Hill Branch. And I love working with all of you. Thank you. You have a lot of great input. So